This talk was originally thought to be a lightning talk, and yesterday, for personal matters, I had to change this talk to be a complete and whole presentation. So if I speak slowly, you might, or if I start talking about magic or other topics, just follow with me. Well, since this was going to be a lightning talk, the history part is really brief, and I can expand a bit more. In the beginning, there were nothing, and there the Big Bang started. No kidding. Okay, let's start talking about decorators. Decorators is a proposal currently in stage 2. I don't know if you know the different stages, but stage 2 is let's say a final draft, and for getting into stage 3, so browsers can start implementing it. It just needs to address some issues from reviewers and the editor and get a few signs. It's been worked by Yehuda Katz since early March 2015. It's been in stage 2 for 11 months. You can see several add-ons for Babel, but for the old spec, stage 1 spec. But gladly, for this current spec, there was a PR for Babylon. That's the parser that Babel uses. And it was merged 2 days ago. It will be released in the new beta. It's Babylon 7 Beta 15. It's due to be released soon. And then the work in Babel will start. But what is a decorator? A decorator is new syntax. Let's show a couple of examples. In this code, I'm imported evented, mixins, and read-only. And we can see that mixins is a decorator because it has the @ sign before. And it's above a class. This is a class decorator. We are decorating the class. And we see also the read-only with the @ symbol before. And it's before a property. So that's a property decorator, a member decorator. You might expect that you could write any JavaScript there, but actually it is not. The only valid syntax is a chain of dot expressions, optionally ended in a function call. We can see foo with args, foo.bar or foo.bar with args, or foo.bar.bus with an optional args. This means that these other syntaxes are not valid. If you have brackets, it's not valid. If you have the function call in the middle, it's not valid either. And any combination you can think of this is not valid either. It's a conservative approach to the syntax. And one of the editor's notes about this is that it might be expanded before stage 3. But for now, this restriction applies. But how can I implement one? Okay, we have spoken about class decorators and member decorators. Class decorators are functions that receives a constructor, a parent class, and an array of member descriptors, and returns nothing. And member decorators are functions that receive a member descriptor and returns a member descriptor. But do any of you know what a member descriptor is? Glad? Because it's defined in the same spec. A member descriptor is actually an interface introduced in the same spec. It's like in the first page. And it has the following properties. You have the kind, that's a string property that so far can only has the value property, string property. In the future, it might have other values. It has the key, that's a string, and is the name of the property. It's static, it's a Boolean, and I don't think it needs much explanation. It's just if the property is static or not. Let me jump over this one. We have an optional key called extras, and that's an array of member descriptors. This is cool because then by decorating one property, you can get several of them. And an optional finisher, that's a function that receives the class once it's finalized, once it's completely defined, and it just gets called. But I jumped over this one, descriptor, property descriptor. Are you familiar with property descriptors in JavaScript? I always forgot that it's usually it's better to ask these questions in a negative form. Is any of you not familiar with property descriptors? Then, as you see, I didn't get any no, but I get several yeses, and they are actually the same. Sorry for that. Property descriptors were introduced in ECMAScript 5.1. That means that they are fully supported. They are even in Internet Explorer 9. Let's see what they are. This is not the actual descriptor, property descriptor type from TypeScript, but I think it's easier to think of a property descriptor of the union of data descriptor and accessor descriptor. Why? Because, well, we'll see in the example, but a data descriptor has 4 fields. The first 2 are common to accessor descriptors. They are configurable and enumerable, both Boolean. Configurable is that if this value is false, I cannot change the descriptor. And enumerable means that this property will be shown when you are recurring the keys of the object. Okay? When we are defining a data descriptor, we give the value in the key value. It can be anything that can be defined in JavaScript. And writable, if you set writable to false, it cannot be changed by the assignment operator. You cannot do a.prop equals whatever. And then we have the accessor descriptor. It has, again, the configurable and enumerable. But in this case, we are defining the value with two functions. The get function that returns the value. This function will be called internally by JavaScript whenever you read the property. And the set function, the function that we will call in assignment. If you are familiar with other languages have similar things. For example, C# has similar things. And a property descriptor is either a data descriptor or an accessor descriptor. For me, it's useful to think it this way because, as we will see in the example, if we want to convert a data descriptor into an accessor descriptor, we need to remove the value and writable keys. Otherwise, JavaScript will fail. Again, now I know what a decorator is, but I don't know how to implement one. So let's implement one. This is a simple validator. Our validator receives a predicate. A predicate we will use to validate the property. Since it's a decorator, it receives a member descriptor and return a member descriptor. The first thing we do is take the descriptor from the member descriptor. This descriptor is the property descriptor, the thing that already exists in JavaScript. Okay? And then we do this awful thing. We are just checking if the writable property is there. If the writable property is there, then we are dealing with a data descriptor. And if it's not, we are dealing with an accessor descriptor. If it's a data descriptor, we will change it to be an accessor descriptor, and that's it. Let's see first the decorate data. It receives the descriptor, the original descriptor property descriptor from the member descriptor, and the predicate. And the first thing we do is take the value. Since this is a data descriptor, sorry for repeating myself so much, but this is something that is not really covered in any JavaScript course. And this was meant to be done in 15 minutes. I need to cover another 15. And all this bullshit counts. So this is a trick I learned from René Lavand. That's a magician, an Argentinian magician. And he's a card magician. The thing is that he can only use one arm. And it's incredible. If you haven't seen anything from René Lavand, just go watch René Lavand. It cannot be done more slow, something like that. No se puede hacer más lento. It's incredible, incredible guy. Remember, this descriptor is the property descriptor. It's a data descriptor, so it has value and has writable. So we take the value out of the descriptor. Okay? If you're not familiar with this syntax, value, this is the construction, and we're taking this is the same as saying let value equals descriptor.value. Okay? And then we have a get function that is just returning value, because we are closing over value. And we have our set that receives a new value, and check using the predicate if it's okay or not. And if it's okay, it sets the value to that new value. That way, we are closing over the value and just can change it. This is not the best implementation possible, but it's the best implementation I found that fits in one slide. And last thing, we really need to do this. If you try to pass a descriptor with get, set, and writable or value, it will fail. Because you cannot add a data descriptor and accessor descriptor. JavaScript doesn't know what to do. So we just delete. I think to be honest, I think this was the first time I used the delete keyword in JavaScript. And you can see here the second time I use it. Whenever I use it for the third time, I'll let you know. I'll tweet. And that's for decorate data. Decorate accessor is much, much simpler. We get the descriptor and the predicate, same as with decorate data. And we just need to get the set function and set it to new value if predicate blah, blah, blah. And instead of assigning it to value, we just call the old set function. And that's it. So let's see an example of an use case. We can have this. Let's see, we have a const that is string, and that's a validator that just we pass a predicate if the value given has type string. And then my class, and we decorate it with isString, and a validator checking that the password is not 1234. And that's it. But there are some gotchas. Evaluation execution. This is a bit difficult to understand at first, but then it really made sense. In this example, just shown, there are two phases, the evaluation and execution. The evaluation, it reads isString. Okay, what is isString? isStrings evaluates to the function defined above. And then it calls validator with that predicate and keeps the function. But then, at execution time, first validator, the second validator, decorates the property, and then isStrings decorate the resulting property from decorating the property. Is this clear? This makes sense to you? Ya está Miguel tocando los huevos. It really makes sense if you think about Decorator this way. Like isString and validator and a member descriptor. It makes sense. Another gotchas are setters and getters. Do you know setters and getters in JavaScript? It was supposed to be a new feature in ECMAScript 2015, but this has been there since Internet Explorer 9. It was in ECMAScript 5.1. Do you see any problem here? This might seem that it's for you to think, but it's for me to drink. Okay, we have a duplicate and get hola. And then we have a map decorating a set hola. How many properties does this class have? How many of you think there are 4 properties? How many of you think there are 3 properties? How many of you think there are 2 properties? How many of you think there are only 1 property? Okay, what do the rest think? There's only 1 property, and the spec says that if you find the same property defined twice, which is pretty much a valid syntax, like in this case, with a different set, a non-coalescible, with two arrays that cannot be mixed together. And that means that one of them needs to be empty. It will fail. So we can just move both of them to the getter, and instead of duplicate, we say duplicate getter, and instead of map, we say map setter, or move them to the setter, but we cannot have them mix. Okay? This is a nice talk to be done in only 15 minutes. So, cool things that can be done with this. Margarita is not here. Oh. We have the classics. We have the read-only properties. Fun thing about this is that Glimmer, do you know what Glimmer is? Cool. Use decorators to say that a property can be written, not that it's read-only. We can do validations. I hope you expected this one, since we have done that in the last 10 minutes. Or define the dependencies in computed properties, or defining a method as a memoized method, auto-binding, do better singleton classes, convert a property to getters and setters. I have an example in my code that's called Javify. And you get a property, and you instead remove that property and get only the get property and set property. It's pretty cool if you're that kind of person. You can deprecate methods, mark them as deprecate, and just warn people, this is deprecated, blah, blah, blah. You can debounce and throttle, or map a return value. And these are the classics. These are the examples everybody do. But I like other examples, like we can get a different Express API, like pretty much inspired by Flask in Python, where you just have a controller, and you define the methods, like get, post, or get with a path in a decorator. And you even can have middleware in Express as decorators. Let's say you have the middleware, the typical middleware of authorized, and you can define that in a decorator, and that's it. And probably my favorite example would be an internationalized API. For example, you can get a class and mark it as internationalized, and then internationalize the methods. Let's say we use the symbol to call the decorator internationalized method with a path, the typical path you use for internationalized strings in the application, and define a static method called sum that receives a variadic number of arguments, and then returns the sum of those arguments. And then, depending on where you run in this, you can get operation sum, operation suma, that's Spanish for sum, or batuqueta, that's Euskara for sum. That's much nicer. And it sounds good. But people usually laugh at this example because they think, what is this useful for? But think about educational software, where you don't want the language to be a barrier. Or think about probably the most successful programming language ever. It's called Microsoft Excel. You laugh, but when I was working in Indra, the best programmer was the secretary, and she had an Excel sheet that I don't know how did it work, but it did things that I could barely do in my programming language of choice. Really, the holidays, everything you can think of, just by marking with X and S and whatever in a spreadsheet. That was amazing. Or if you know GeoGebra, that's educational software that admits some commands, and it's geometrical software. They call it dynamic geometric. You cannot ask a child of 10 years to know how to say standard deviation in English. You need to have proper commands in their own language. So I think I'm sorry to be short 10 minutes, but better be short 10 minutes than 5 minutes over the limit. But any questions? We have plenty of time for questions. You can ask about decorators, about Glimmer, about Ember, about Magic. About the beer. Let's check if the mic works. One moment. ¿No está bien? Batuqueta.
This question is a little bit of a rant. Because for example, I have a Python background where we have.
I'm sorry for you.
Well, I have many backgrounds. Python is the one.
I work in Indra. We all have a past.
Yeah. Python introduced me to decorators,
yes.
And there you have decorators and descriptors, but they are basically two different things that they can be combined, but they are not combined by the language itself. And for example, decorators are just any function that receives functions and returns another functions.
Yes.
So any function that is a higher order function can be used as a decorator, and that kind of simplicity, I love it. And my question is, what are your opinions, or don't you think that in JavaScript world they are like overcomplicating things with syntax, with rules, and at some point now you want to use something pretty cool and new, but suddenly you need to load your head with a lot of preconditions that you need to know in order to effectively use the language feature?
As I see in this particular example, decorators, I think this is the typical feature that it's for most people to use, but not for most people to write. Okay? In Javascript 5, I think, the property descriptor was introduced. And it's a really powerful feature that nobody is using because it's freakingly hard to use. It has a really bad API. To get a descriptor, you need to define the property or create the descriptor by yourself, and then use object house on get on property, and then you need to pass the object and the name of the property, and you get a descriptor, and then object define property with the object, the name of the property, and the descriptor. So decorators were not thought. In the beginning, it was thought like in Python for syntax classes, but it was like it's a bit stupid to define new syntax where you are not saving that much space, really, because higher order functions was in JavaScript since the very beginning. So you're not saving really any space. Maybe in Python because the method declaration cannot be done easily with higher order functions. But in JavaScript, it was done that way since forever. So it was done by changing the property descriptor, which makes sense because you want to be able to change deeper things in the property, like it's writable, it's not writable. Do we want to log something or the time that it takes to do to run the function? I think the problem with the decorator syntax or the decorator name per se is that it's not a decorator as in other languages. It's not a higher order function, and you can see this in the proposal issue tracker. Like there are plenty of people that, hey, why can't you decorate normal functions outside of a class? It's like you cannot decorate it because there's this thing called higher order functions. It's been there since forever. And it's the same that you want to do, but you don't need to put an @ symbol there. It doesn't make sense. So I think, like, are you bloating the language? No, I think you are helping the people to use things that were in the language but that couldn't be really used because the API sucked big time. So I don't think so. I mean, even while reading the notes, because, well, the TC39 takes notes of all the meetings, and you can read them online in GitHub. They're really there. So performance is really taken into account. Like, one of the conditions for this conservative syntax in the decorators is performance. So I think it's something that will be really easy to use. It's much more powerful than what we have. And even if it will be harder to write than it is now, I don't think it's for everyone to write.
Okay, thanks.
Does that satisfy, or? Because I'm totally for ranting here. He heard ranting and said,
No, I had the incorrect belief that like decorators were like abandoned as spec. Now that you said like they were merged into the Babylon, what is towards the ECMAScript, like what is the roadmap, or when can we expect them?
Let me comment on the abandon thing. And okay, if any of you like Angular or something like that, you might want to pop out for a few minutes. No, seriously. There was this first spec with a completely different syntax. It was mostly a higher order function for property descriptor, and that's it. And it was restricted and enlarged in other parts. And it was quite quickly implemented in Babel. You can see a Babel legacy add-on, and it's there and you can use it. And TypeScript even implemented it and marked it as experimental, and it's clearly marked in experimental. You go to the documentation and you'll see a big box saying experimental. And then Google came and did Angular 2 and said, what's experimental? I don't understand this word. Let's use it all around. And, well, if you know a little about TC39, there are people from all the frameworks. So there were several stoppers, like people were discussing whether to decorate properties or arguments in a function. Because Angular wanted to have that. I don't know why, but they wanted really to have that. So most stoppers were overcome last summer. Like, okay, this might be interesting, but you can also create your own proposal for extending this. And it's been in stage 2 for 11 months. I can understand that this has been a long time, like 11 months are like, but one of the champions, Yehuda Katz, was father for the first time in like 6 months ago, more or less. So I guess a child is a stopper, like, and it's an important stopper, and I don't care waiting for it. But what I like is that reading the notes, other proposals need to take into account the decorator proposal. That means this is serious. Like, if you are changing other proposals to take into account this is getting serious. And as I said, Babylon got the PR merge 2 days ago. And there's a guy doing the Google Summer of Code with this. So I expect that we get something by the end of the summer. But don't quote me on this. Or quote me, I don't care. Thank you.